morning, church. Go ahead and stand as we worship this morning. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. You guys can have a seat.
Good morning, everyone. If we haven't met before, my name is Jason. I am the lead pastor here, and you'll see more of me later. This is normally where we do the announcements in our service. We don't have any regular announcements today, but there's just a few things I want to let you know. Whether you've been here for a long time or whether you've been here for a short time, or whether this is your first time, whatever it is, there's a few places where if you want to know what's going on in the church, you can kind of look. And because they aren't mentioned super often from stage, I want to take this opportunity. One is, as you came in, you were probably offered a little handout. If you open that up in the top right corner, there's always like a what's coming up section that kind of has a few big church-wide events. It doesn't have everything that's going on, doesn't include like small groups and stuff during the school year, but the big events are there. The other place, which is a really good location to see everything that's going on, is on your phone, on our church app. If you don't have it, please download it. It's a great way to know what's going on, get involved, sign up for small groups, all sorts of stuff like that. We use messages through this a lot to communicate fine details. And otherwise, you can also have access to the church calendar on there. They'll show you everything that's coming up. And then the last place is when you come in, so like the door's right beneath me, and you come in this way, right? If you look on the left-hand side, this way, when you come in, there's this big metal board. We call that the billboard. And that always has sign-ups on it, upcoming events, random things in the community occasionally that you might want to know about. That's always a really good location to see things and get information as well. So 3 different main locations where you can get information. There's a few other ones as well, but those are really the big ones that are always available. So I just want to make sure that everyone knew about that. The other thing, again, not really an announcement, more of a celebration, is our youth group survived CIY, which we're very excited about. If you happen to see Andrew at any point in the next week, then give him a hug, tell him you did a good job, let him cry on your shoulder. Andrew was our sponsor, one of our elders, and he was our sponsor for this event and traveled with them. He has a very busy summer with stuff like this. He does a great job. I was able to talk to one of our youth this morning just a little bit about their experience, and I highly encourage you to participate in my favorite hobby, which is when the youth get back from a big event like this, ask them how it went, and they're going to go, good, and then ask them what they learned. And then they freeze and they forget how to speak the English language, and they say, because they don't like being put on the spot. It's my favorite thing in the world. Make them nervous. It's a ton of fun. I encourage you to participate. But really, if you have a chance to talk to one of them and actually see how things went, please do. Give Andrew a pat on the back. It's a wonderful experience where these kids get to worship and hear the word preached and pray and serve for an entire week besides hundreds of other high school students, which is a really, really wonderful experience, can be very formational for them. So thank you guys to everyone that supported that in some way and prayed for them and helped that to happen. That's all I got for you guys today. We're going to pray, and then we're going to get back into service. Lord, help us to focus on you today, to worship you well, to pray to you well, to remember your sacrifice for us in communion, to study your word well in the sermon. Help each one of us to walk out today with some sort of changed thought, changed feeling, changed action, something in our lives different, no matter how big or how small, something different that will help us to serve you and to love our neighbors better. Lord, we love you, we trust you, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Go ahead and stand as we continue. Everyone needs compassion, a love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of a Savior, the hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Oh, I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. You rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Father, this morning I would just ask that as we go out from this place today, Lord, that we would be salt and light to this world. That those who we encounter and those who see us as we live our daily lives would wonder what is different about them, Lord. That they would see you in our actions and our lives would speak, and they would come to know you. Lord, that is what we ask, and that is our prayer, that everyone we meet would come to know you, Lord. So today I ask that you give Jason the words to speak and help us to grow to know you better so we can shine your light better, Lord. We ask all this in your precious name.
So I did this first service too. I'm going to start off with a disclaimer, which is my dad is an amazing dad. I love him. I have a wonderful relationship with him. I'm happy that he's the man that raised me. That being said, let me talk about a story where my dad screwed up. I only have one. It's amazing, isn't it? So he'll love that. He'll text me whenever he gets to this sermon. I think he's a couple weeks behind right now, but he'll text me and be like, I love that joke. You should say that more often. Anyway. So I was 16 or 17 years old. I know I was driving because in Virginia, God's country, we have to wait till 16 till we drive, not 14 like you heathens do here. And I was out with friends, and I had a pretty late curfew on the weekends. I think it was like 1 a.m., which I do not recommend, by the way, if you have a teenager. Don't do that, but I was the youngest of four. My parents are like, are you going to jail? Is anyone dead? Cool. You know, like, at a certain point with larger families, I know that's not large for the homeschool families in the crowd, but for larger families, like at a certain point, parents are just like, as long as you're still alive and not in trouble, it's fine. So I was out, and I'd been out pretty late with friends before, and we didn't really get up to anything. I was a kid who, when I got in trouble, I got in big trouble, but I didn't get in trouble often. And that particular night, I promise you, I'm not lying to you, I was actually hanging out at the church. One of my really good friends, his older brother was our youth pastor, and occasionally we'd get the keys from him because our youth room had like a projector set up, and we'd go in there and we'd watch movies because it was like cheaper than going to the movie theater and way better than anything anyone had at their house, right? And so we were hanging out, we were watching movies, and I was out till like, I think I got home maybe just after 1 a.m. And my dad was waiting up, which is weird because he normally went to bed at like 8. And I was like, who died? Why is my dad awake right now? And he just started tearing into me. And it was one of those like times you're getting chewed out so bad you don't have an opportunity to get a word in. Because I really didn't think I had done anything wrong. I was like, I've been out this late before. I thought this was my curfew. I don't know why you're angry at me. But I couldn't even say anything to defend myself. And he was getting after me so good it woke my mom up, who came out, and she had her like moo-moo or whatever. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Old lady nightgown. And she walks out and she's kind of sitting in the corner like this, just kind of watching and not saying anything. Then when my dad stormed off to go to bed, and I literally had not been able to say like a word to defend myself, my mom comes over and gives me a hug, and I'm kind of shocked. And she just kind of gives me a hug and goes, I know you didn't think you were doing anything wrong. I'll take care of him. And then just left. And then the next day, I was in trouble all day. And it was one of those like, you'd better stay in your room unless I need you for manual labor type groundings, you know? And my dad like wouldn't speak to me all day. And then like Sunday morning, my mom says, I talked to him. I explained, I know you've been out late before. You thought that was fine. I don't really know why he was upset either. We dealt with it. You're not grounded. You're good. So all's well that ends well, I guess. The reason why I tell this story is because it made me a little bit nervous for a while because I didn't think I was breaking any rules. I really didn't. I wasn't trying to be like a disobedient child. There were definitely stories I could tell you where I was. This was not one of them. And it made me really nervous and honestly a little bit angry. The idea that like I might think that I'm following all the rules and doing what my dad wants, and he might still just go off the handle and ground me and get super angry, not talk to me for a whole day and everything. Like that was really upsetting to me in a lot of ways. And luckily, I don't have a ton of stories about my dad like that because, again, he was a really good dad. We have a wonderful relationship now. But even one or two can kind of throw you off, right? And some of you guys, you have relationships that are like that or even are much worse. You have relationships where you're constantly trying to guess what the other person is thinking, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's a romantic partner. You feel like you're always walking on eggshells. Like the rules change sometimes day to day, sometimes hour to hour, and no one ever bothers to inform you. And when we have these kinds of relationships or even these kinds of one-off experiences, it can start to shape the way we think about everyone. It can start to shape the way we think about God. Where we wonder, if I am trying to follow God and I just make a mistake, I break a rule that I didn't know existed, or I do something that, I knew it was wrong, but I honestly was trying not to, and I just gave in. I just had a moment of weakness. Is God going to punish me? Is he going to fly off the handle? And especially after you read passages like the one that we studied together last week. Now, if you weren't with us last week, I'll do a very quick recap here, but I recommend going back and watching the sermon. The people of Israel entering into this land called Canaan, this place that's going to become Israel one day, a land that God has given to them. And as they travel into this land, they're fighting battle after battle, and they come to this city called Ai. And as they approach Ai, they do the same thing they've always done. God has told them to take this land, told them to take this city, and they approach the city and they attack it and they lose. For the first time, they lose. And a little over 30 people die in this battle, and the army is routed. And Joshua goes to the Lord and he says, look, you told us to take this land. You told us to make war against its inhabitants. You told us to seize their cities. But when we went to go do it, we lost. And you said that you would give us victory. What's going on here? And God lights into him. Because there was a person in their camp, a person in their nation named Achan, who had sinned against God. He had taken some things that were to be devoted. They were to be given over to destruction. Things that were either supposed to go to the temple or be destroyed because they were not Israel's property, they were God's property. And he had taken them for himself and hidden them away. And no one knew about it but Achan and the people living with him. And yet the whole nation was punished for it. They'd made a mistake. Now, they did fail to ask God what their next steps was. And it's implied, I think, in that passage and by this one, that if they had inquired of God, God would have told them what was going on. So they did mess up, but they didn't do it intentionally. They just made a mistake. And over 30 people die. And then Achan and his whole family are killed. And you read stories like this where God reacts very harshly to sin. And I think for some of us, that have had certain relationships, certain experiences, we start wondering, is God going to punish me if I make a mistake, an honest mistake? If I'm trying to follow him and I just screw up, is God going to be angry with me? Is he going to disown me? Is he going to throw me away? In fact, that's the question that I want us to be looking at today. Is God going to punish me if I make a mistake? And I love it when the Bible does this. The book of Joshua kind of brings this question to the front of our minds when it tells us the story of Ai and the story of Achan in the last chapter. But then, in chapter 9 and in 10 today, it kind of answers this question. Is God going to punish me if I make a mistake? And we're actually going to see today, I'm going to ruin it for you a little bit. We're going to see today some people that make some pretty big mistakes, but God does not deal with them the way that he deals with Achan and the way that he deals with Israel at the city of Ai. In fact, he's going to behave very, very differently. So is God going to punish me if I make a mistake? Before we actually jump into Joshua chapter 9 and chapter 10, which is where we'll be today, we need to read something from Deuteronomy. I told you at the beginning of this sermon series, Joshua should kind of be read in concert with Deuteronomy and Judges and Kings. They're kind of all meant to be read together. And so it shouldn't surprise us, right, that Deuteronomy chapter 20 is kind of giving us context we need to understand what's going on here. This is God speaking to Israel while they're still in the wilderness, and he says this to them. Indeed, you shall annihilate them, speaking about the people in the land that he's bringing them into, the land that will be Israel. Indeed, you shall annihilate them, the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, just as the Lord your God has commanded, so that they may not teach you to do all the abhorrent things that they do for their gods, and you thus sin against the Lord your God. There's two things here that I think we need to notice. The first one is the command is to annihilate them. And when you see other passages that talk about these people groups, there's kind of three different ways to describe. Annihilate them, utterly destroy them, or drive them out. The idea, no matter what verb is used, is you can't live with them. You can't allow them to stay within the borders of the nation that you are being given. And the reason is given here and in a few other passages, but here in specific, it says, so they will not teach you to do abhorrent things. That's the second thing we need to notice. They're being driven out, they're being destroyed, they're being defeated, they're being pushed away from Israel so that they will not teach Israel to do things they ought not to do. So they won't teach them to worship false gods. So they won't teach them to worship their God in a way they should not. So they won't teach them to sin against their neighbor. So they won't teach them to do, as Deuteronomy says, abhorrent things. And that's really important for us. Because when you read, if you read the entirety of Deuteronomy chapter 20, we're going to reference it here in a minute as well. But when you read the entirety of Deuteronomy chapter 20, you see that they are very expressly forbidden from giving refuge to any of these people, these Hivites and Canaanites and Perizzites and all the other ites. But in Joshua chapter 2 and chapter 6, we run into this lady named, does anyone remember her name? Starts with an R. Rahab, from the city of Jericho. She's a Canaanite. And she professes faith in God. She's rescued, even though the rest of the city is destroyed. She and her family and all who belong to them are rescued, and they become a part of the nation of Israel. But the Canaanites are one of the ones that are supposed to be annihilated, utterly destroyed, or driven out. And yet God rescues them. And I think Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 18 gives us a hint. Because right there at the end, right? It says, so they will not teach you to do all the abhorrent things that they do. And Rahab, when she professes faith in God, she's saying, I'm leaving my city behind, I'm leaving my nation behind, I'm leaving my gods behind, and I am serving your God. Is she still a risk to teach them to do abhorrent things? When she's left her life behind and decided that she will worship Yahweh, the God of Israel, obey his demands and his decrees, she's not a threat anymore. In fact, she's an asset. And I think that's why she ends up marrying into the family that would one day give birth to King David, making her not only an ancestor to the kings of Israel and Judah, but an ancestor to Jesus himself. She's not only accepted, she's actually blessed and becomes a part of a very important lineage, because despite the fact that she was a Canaanite, when she puts her faith in God, God forgives. That's something very important that we want to hold on to here. There seems to be a hint in Deuteronomy chapter 20 that if someone is not going to teach you the abhorrent things, if they're going to worship the Lord your God, maybe they'll be forgiven. Maybe they'll be included. And we run into it with Rahab. And we're actually going to run into a similar thing here today. So in Joshua chapter 9 is where we're going to pick up the story about these non-Israelites, about these pagan peoples that are amongst the Amorites, one of the peoples we were just told in Deuteronomy needs to be destroyed. And we read their story in Joshua chapter 9, beginning in verse 3. Verses 1 and 2 just says there's all these other kings of the Amorites in the hill country that are going to fight against Israel. And in verse 3, we pick up reading this. When the inhabitants of Gibeon, that's their chief city, when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they on their part acted with cunning. They went and prepared provisions and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys and wineskins that were worn out and torn and mended, with worn-out patched sandals on their feet and worn-out clothes. And all their provisions were dry and moldy. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and to the Israelites, we have come from a far country, so now make a treaty with us. Now, if we had taken the time to read the rest of Deuteronomy chapter 20, not just the 2 or 3 verses we read a moment ago, there's a lot of instructions about how Israel is supposed to make war. There's instructions about what they're supposed to do during long sieges, how they're supposed to interact with different peoples. And one of the sets of instructions tells them that if someone is in the land, this is the part that we read, you have to destroy them. But if someone is not from this land, if they're from far away, you can make a treaty with them, and they will become water carriers and wood cutters. And this is language that we're going to see show up repeatedly throughout this passage. And we're going to read every verse today. We'll see it a few times in what we're reading. But if you read the whole passage, all of chapter 9, you're going to see that phrase, water carriers and woodcutters, show up a couple times. In fact, if you continue to read the rest of what Gibeon is asking for, they keep referring to themselves as servants. And that's another really important word. They keep saying, we are your servants, we are your servants. I think it's like 3 or 4 times throughout the entire chapter. Gibeon refers to itself as the servants of Israel. So it seems that what they're doing is they're going to Israel and they're asking, I'm going to use a really big word here, but we're going to break it down. They're asking for a vassalage treaty or a suzerain treaty. And all that means, both these, they're slightly different, but they're very similar ideas, is that there's a really powerful nation that's in charge. And they're going to take under their wing this client state that they're going to protect, but the client state has to give taxes and resources and other forms of service to the more powerful country. That seems to be what Gibeon is asking for. And it's a very, very common thing, not only in the ancient world, but even like if you get into like medieval European history, it's a really common thing. And what Gibeon's doing is saying, hey, we're going to be the clients, you're going to be the bosses, and we are going to serve you. We will listen to you. If you need soldiers, you can have our soldiers. If you need resources, you can have our resources. All we ask in exchange is that you protect us, which will come up later in the book of Joshua, and that you don't kill us. That's all we're asking in exchange. This is a vassalage agreement. There's a powerful nation, there's a weak one. There's a boss and there's a client, a worker. So that seems to be what they're asking for here. Because Gibeon has realized they have basically 3 options. And I think it's important that we kind of highlight what they are. Gibeon has heard about Israel. And again, if you read the entirety of chapter 9, it becomes very apparent. They've heard about the things that God has done through Moses. We're already told in the verses we just read that they know about the things that God has done through Joshua, about what happened at Ai and what happened at Jericho. So they've heard how powerful Israel is and how powerful Israel's God is. And they know they can't win that fight. They want to do something different. They want to find a way out. And Gibeon basically has 3 options. They can lie, or they can lie. Here's what I mean by that. First of all, they can lie down and die. That's an option they have. They can choose to give up, let Israel destroy them, or they can get out of their cities and they can just book it for the hills and hope that Israel doesn't catch up or leave the area entirely. They can just give up. They can lie down and die. Does that sound like a good option to you? Does that sound appealing to any of us? Next time that you encounter a big challenge in life, you're just like, well, may as well die. No? None of you? Okay, cool. Well, Gibeon didn't think it was a good option either. They had another option, though, and this is one that I think is hinted at earlier in the book, but they don't seem to consider. They can lie down at God's feet, and here's what I mean by that. They can throw themselves on God's mercy. They can place their lives in his hands. Because it seems, from the things that Gibeon says, and from the things that Gibeon does, that they understand that God, that Yahweh, the God of Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, that this God is more powerful and more worthy of worship than the gods that they grew up worshiping. It seems that they understand the same thing that Rahab understood, that it's better to be on his team than fighting against him. It seems that they are ready to follow him. So they could go to Joshua. And they could say, here's the situation, man. We live in the area that God has given to you. And we know that we can't fight against you. But we want to worship your God. We want to help you. We want to be a part of your people. And they can trust that God and that the people of God will have mercy on them. Because that's what Rahab does. And she is rescued, even the rest of her city is destroyed. That's also what the city of Nineveh does in the book of Jonah. You guys remember, those of you who've been with us for a couple months, we studied the book of Jonah a couple of months ago, and there's this great city, Nineveh, it's this evil city that ends up being the head of this great empire called Assyria that does dreadful things. And it's a really kind of funny book in a really dark way, because God comes to Jonah, his prophet, and tells him, I want you to go to Nineveh and tell them that in 3 days I will destroy their city. That's his entire message. And Jonah, after a whole lot of shenanigans, gets to the city of Nineveh, and he preaches maybe the shortest sermon in the entirety of the Old Testament. Anyone know what it is? God's going to destroy your city in 3 days. Notice how he doesn't say, if you repent, he might save you. No, so he doesn't say he'll destroy you in 3 days unless you do these things. No, he just says in 3 days you're going to be destroyed. And that's all God told him to say. In 3 days, God will overthrow this city. And then the king of Nineveh tells all of his people to lie down and die? No. He tells them, everyone put on sackcloth and ashes and fast. Who knows? Perhaps God will relent. And God does. And he forgives the city. And then Jonah gets mad about it, and he says maybe the most important line in the entire book of Jonah. He's speaking to God, and he says, I knew that if they repented, you would forgive them. They're not Israelites. They're not God's people. In fact, they are a people that, in the future, much after Jonah, would end up becoming great enemies of the nation of Israel. They would actually be a tool of God's judgment on the northern kingdom after the kingdom split in two. But when they repented, God relented. When they changed, God forgave. Gibeon could do the same thing, and I think I can confidently say God would forgive them. But Gibeon apparently doesn't know God very well. They've heard the stories. They know he's powerful. They know they want to be on his side, but maybe they don't trust him. Because it's hard to trust someone that you don't know well. It's hard to trust someone that you've not been around for very long. They don't realize, they don't understand, or they're unwilling to try to throw themselves down at God's feet and trust his mercy. So instead, they pick the third option. They don't want to lie down and die. They don't trust God enough to throw themselves on his mercy. So instead, they choose to lie to Israel. Because they know Israel can make treaties with nations that are far away, but they can't make treaties with nations within this land. So they get a bunch of old, worn-out junk together to make it look like they've traveled a really long way, and they get moldy, dry food, and they travel to Israel's camp, and they say, we are from very far away, make a treaty with us. The Gibeonites, they decide to lie. And at first, the leaders of Israel are very suspicious, and they kind of aren't really sure, and they even say, like, how do we know that you're from far away? And the Gibeonites say, oh, look at all of our old, worn-out clothes and our dry, moldy food. Surely no one would gather all of this in an attempt to lie to you, right? That would be crazy. And the leaders of Israel go, that would be crazy, and they make a treaty with them. We read about it in Joshua chapter 9, verses 14 and 15, where the book of Joshua says this: the leaders partook of the provisions and did not ask direction from the Lord. That's really important. Same thing they did before the first battle of Ai. They did not ask for God's direction, and Joshua made peace with them, guaranteeing their lives by a treaty, and the leaders of the congregation swore an oath to them. So here's where the story sits so far. Gibeon has lied, and not only that, but if you kind of squint, they've stolen. Because part of these vassalage agreements, and it's not explicit in chapter 9, but it's very explicit in chapter 10 that this is the case, is Gibeon gets to maintain control of their cities. These are cities that were meant to go to Israel. They're being given by God to the people of Israel. So Gibeon is taking something that God did not intend for them to have, and they're doing it by lying, by deceit. At the same time, Israel ends up making this agreement, making this treaty, because they did not consult God. These are the exact same sins that we saw in chapter 7 and chapter 8. Gibeon lied and stole, just like Achan, and Israel failed to consult God, just like they did before the first battle of Ai. Now, if you're confused about that lying part, there's a line that actually we read last week, but it was really, really quick, where when God is talking to Joshua, he says, in fact, not just Achan, but he says, all of Israel has stolen and has lied. So God himself says, the nation has stolen and they have lied, and that is why I am punishing you. Because Achan did these things that he shouldn't do. And now Gibeon is doing the exact same sins that Achan did. They got his entire family killed. They had over 30 men killed at the first battle of Ai that led to Israel's defeat. And Israel, which could have avoided that by talking to God, once again did the same thing where they made decisions without asking God's opinion first. Everyone's committing the same exact sins. So what do we expect to happen? Because the first time that someone lied and cheated and stole in the book of Joshua, he and his entire family were killed. The first time that Israel made a decision without consulting God, they lost a battle and over 30 soldiers lost their lives and they were routed and the people's heart melted with fear. So what are we expecting to happen? Is God going to punish them for making these mistakes? Because that's what he did last time, right? He punished them. So is he going to do it again? Now, if we change the time and we change the scale, I think a lot of us can actually empathize with where the Gibeonites and where Israel are sitting at this point in the story. Because, believe it or not, you have all made mistakes. I have made mistakes. I know, you think I'm perfect, right? That's why you're here, right? But we have all made mistakes. We've all sinned. We've all done things we ought not to. Sometimes out of ignorance. Sometimes we did know better, and we just screwed up. We just did something that we shouldn't do. Maybe we did it repeatedly. We have all made mistakes. And so if we're sitting here and we've been primed in chapter 7 and chapter 8 of the book of Joshua to expect God to drop the hammer on Gibeon and on Israel for making these mistakes, making the same mistakes we just saw 2 chapters ago, then we also have to expect God to punish us too when we make the same stupid mistakes. A lot of us make mistakes like Israel, right? We make big decisions. We don't ever stop to pray. We never consult God. We never ask what his will is. We just go and do what we think is right. Usually doesn't work out very well for us, but we do it all the time, don't we? Others of us, we sin in different ways. I doubt that you've ever lied your way into an international treaty. If you have, I'm scared and a little impressed, but I doubt any of us have ever actually done that. But you've lied to your spouse. You've lied to your friends. You've lied to your parents. You've lied to your siblings. We've all lied. We've made that mistake. Is God going to punish us? Some of us, we've stolen. We've stolen passively. We owe someone something. We just decide not to pay it back. Or we've stolen intentionally, slipping something into our pocket that doesn't belong to us. Whether when we were a child or maybe even some of us as adults, we have stolen. Others of us, we've gossiped. Others of us, we've committed adultery. Whether in fact or whether in our minds, which Jesus says that if you even look at someone with lust, you've already committed adultery in your heart. So many more of us are guilty of that sin than are willing to admit it. We have all sinned. We have all made mistakes. Is God going to punish us too? Well, in Joshua chapter 9, verse 19 through 21, we see after the Gibeonites' lie is discovered that actually God doesn't punish them at all. Picking up in verse 19, after the leaders of Israel have discovered that Gibeon lies, we read this. All the leaders of Israel, said to all the congregation, "We have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we must not touch them. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that wrath may not come upon us. Because of the oath that we swore to them, the leaders said, 'Let them live.' And so they became woodcutters and drawers of water for all the congregation, as the leaders had decided concerning them." The leaders of Israel here say something very, very, very important. This is what we will do. We will let them live so that wrath may not come upon us. See, these leaders of Israel seem to know God well enough that they know they made a mistake. They've read Deuteronomy chapter 20. Some of them may have been present when those words were spoken to them. And they know that they weren't supposed to make a treaty with the city of Gibeon and the cities that surrounded it. But they did, and they made an oath in the name of God, and they know God well enough to know if they break the oath, they will be making a bad situation worse. God expects them to keep their word. Now, some of us do not have that same talent. I know me, especially when things get heated, or when I feel like I've screwed up, or when I feel like I've been wronged, I start digging a hole and I keep digging. And my wife more than once has said to me, either because we are having a conflict or because she is watching me have a conflict with someone else, "You can put down the shovel now, Jason." Just me, no one else. It's awesome to have such a perfect congregation, but it does make me self-conscious. But Israel's leaders, to their credit, they know when to stop digging. We're not going to make a bad situation worse. We are going to keep our word. But we're still sitting here expecting God to punish. And what we read at first, it can come off like a punishment. If we haven't been reading carefully, we haven't been thinking about this, making them woodcutters and drawers of water for all the congregation, that sounds like a punishment. But this is exactly what the Gibeonites had asked for. Because again, like I said a moment ago, repeatedly, I think 3 or 4 times throughout the passage, the Gibeonites referred themselves as the servants of Israel. They say, "We are your servants, we are your servants." We're going to read a verse in a moment where it says, "We are your servants." They're asking for a vassalage treaty. They're asking to be the workers under the protection and under the control of the powerful nation of Israel. And this language, will be woodcutters and drawers of water, is not saying we're going to be slaves that belong to individuals within Israel that work in their house, that are part of their property. No, because we actually see in chapter 10, they still own cities. They still control the Gibeonite cities. They still seemingly have a standing military. These aren't things that slaves do. They ask to be servants, to be vassals, to be clients. And the leaders of Israel saying, "Well, you're going to do just that. And you will provide us with water." Gibeon and the surrounding cities were known for their springs and for their wells, so you'll provide us with water. And they're in the hill country, one of the wooded areas. And so you'll provide us with lumber as well, which we'll need for rebuilding cities, building siege engines, supplying our army, making villages and farms, settling the land as God has asked us to do. In other words, the leaders of Israel say, "We are going to honor our treaty, no more and no less." It's not a punishment. Then we see Joshua speak to them. And there's 2 things here we're going to see. First of all, he's going to use very strong language to condemn what they did. And second of all, we're going to see that word slave. We're actually going to talk about it here in a minute. But in Joshua chapter 9, verse 22 through 25, we see Joshua speak directly to the leaders of Gibeon and condemn what they've done. Joshua summoned them and says, "Why did you deceive us, saying we are very far from you, when in fact you are living among us? Now therefore you are cursed," very important word, "and you will always be slaves." I know I just said that's not what's going on here. We're going to touch on it. Some of you will always be slaves, woodcutters and drawers of water for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Because it was told to your servants," there it is again, they call themselves his servants, "it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and destroy all the inhabitants of the land before you. So we were in great fear for our lives because of this thing." We knew God was going to end us. We didn't want that to happen. "Now we are in your hand. Do as seems good and right in your sight to do to us." And this is what he did for them. Joshua saved them from the Israelites and did not kill them. But on that day, Joshua made them woodcutters and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord, to continue to this day in the place that he should choose. Joshua says they're cursed. And that is a very, very strong word. And it is every bit as bad as you think it is. It's used in Genesis chapter 3 to talk about the curse that is placed on the ground. It's talk about Genesis in chapter 3 to talk about the curse that's put on the serpent for lying to Eve and leading to their sin. This is a strong word that talks about when God has turned against something. And it kind of bothers me that Joshua uses it here, because everything after this is actually really positive. Now, I know it says some of you will always be slaves. And here's the thing. That word slave, the Hebrew word is ebed. It is the same word that's used all throughout the rest of the passage and is always translated servant. You will always be ebed, woodcutters and drawers of water. It's the same word that's used at the bottom of this slide here. Your servant Moses, ebed. It's the same word. And it can't possibly mean slave here. Because again, in chapter 10, Gibeon still owns cities, governs their own cities, and seemingly has their own standing military. Those are 3 things that slaves do not do. So honestly, I think the translators, the version I'm using here, just did a bad job with this. Ebed, 90% of the time, does mean slave, but it doesn't always mean that. And in this case, in this passage, I don't think it means that a single time, because it doesn't make sense when you read chapter 10. I think what Joshua is saying is you will be servants, not property, but you will be workers. You will be under our authority, but not our property. And in fact, actually, the Gibeonites show up much, much later in the book of Kings, where they demand a blood price against a royal family that wronged them, and King David gives it to them. That is not something you do for slaves. The Gibeonites are not slaves. They are clients, they are vassals. And in fact, seemingly, they eventually disappear from the record. They seem to intermarry with the Israelites and become Israelites themselves. They're not slaves. And in fact, when the leaders of Israel said, hey, you're going to be water carriers and woodcutters, you're going to supply supplies for the entire congregation, for the whole assembly, for the armies, for the people of Israel, Joshua reaffirms that, but he also says that you will be servants before the altar of the Lord. You see that in that summary statement there? On that day, Joshua made them woodcutters and jars of water for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord. The Gibeonites are going to serve in the tabernacle. And again, I think some of us, we see this as a punishment, to which I say, that is insane. There is one other group in all of Israel that gets a deal like this. They're the relatives of Aaron and Moses, the tribe of Levi. They are given their own cities. They're called the Levitical cities. A few of them very special cities are called the sanctuary cities, and they have a certain role in their legal process. And they're given flocks and they're given property to own and to have and to supply for themselves. And they serve in the tabernacle. They keep it clean, they keep it tidy, they keep it up. And also a certain family, Aaron's family within the tribe of Levi, those people are the priests. They're the ones that make the sacrifices. They're the ones who enter into the Holy of Holies to communicate with God. Now, the Gibeonites don't get all the rights that the Levites do. But they're the only other people in all of Israel given their own cities and their own land and permitted to serve within the tabernacle. They are given all three. This doesn't sound like a curse. It sounds like a blessing. The Levites get their role in the tabernacle because they stood with God against their relatives. When their relatives were turning against God and worshiping him in wrong ways when Moses was still their leader, Moses called the Levites to his side, and they became basically the National Guard getting deployed to put down the riots. And their reward was to be allowed to serve in the tabernacle. And the Gibeonites are the only other people permitted to do so. Is this really a curse? Or is Joshua condemning what they've done and yet still kind of slipping them a reward? Because even though the Gibeonites did this the wrong way, they were doing the right thing. They shouldn't have lied. They should have thrown themselves at God's feet like Rahab did, like Nineveh did, like so many others have done. They should have been honest and trusted God to protect them. So they did it the wrong way, but they were turning against their gods, against the way they were raised, against their neighbors in order to serve the God of Israel. They did the right thing the wrong way. And does God punish them? He rewards them. So Gibeon lied. They made a mistake. But because of their faith, God still rewards them. But we still have Israel to deal with, because the last time that they failed to consult God, they were defeated in battle and many died. The next battle that we run into is in Joshua chapter 10. We read about it here. The Gibeonites went to Joshua at the camp in Gilgal and said, "Do not abandon your servants. Come quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites who live in the hill country are gathered against us." So again, the Gibeonites, they have their own cities, seemingly their own military, because they're holding out this long. And they go to Joshua and they say, "Remember our treaty. We're your vassals. We're your clients. You have to protect us. Please come help." And Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the fighting force with him, all of the mighty warriors. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear them, for I have handed them over to you, and not one shall stand before you." Not only does God not remove his blessing like he did at Ai, for the same exact mistake. But this time he blesses them, he reassures them, and he says, this massive army you've gone up against, this massive force that is unlike anything you've seen in the promised land so far, I have handed them over to you. They will not stand against you. You will defeat them because I am with you. Gibeon is a liar and a thief and a cheat, but they believe in God. And they're trying to follow him. They're just really screwing up in the process. And God blesses them and brings them into his temple to serve him. In Israel, they've made the same mistake for a second time in like 3 weeks, which should sound familiar to a lot of us because we all do the same darn thing, making the same mistake over and over again, and God doesn't punish them this time. Instead, he reassures them, he walks with them, he aids them, he blesses them. We started off with this question, is God going to punish me when I make a mistake, when I screw up, when I'm trying to follow him, but something just doesn't go according to plan? Whether it's out of ignorance, whether it's intentional, whether it's just me giving in to anger or giving in to lust or doing something that I shouldn't do, is God going to punish me? And the thing that we've learned today by seeing the Gibeonites, by seeing the Israelites, is this: my mistakes are smaller than God's mercy. And some of us need to be reminded this because we carry heavy burdens that there is no reason for us to continue to carry. Some of you, you've reached a stage in your life where you have found that special someone. Maybe it was many years ago, maybe it was just recently. But you've made some mistakes in your past. And something that has come up in conversation maybe more than once, something that has hurt you, something that has hurt your partner, is the fact that you did not wait. Maybe you didn't know God then, maybe you did, and you just decided, well, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe you convinced yourself, we're going to get married one day, so it doesn't really matter. And it has caused harm to your relationship. It has hurt the one that you are with. It has caused you guilt, and it has caused you sadness. And while that is a serious thing, and it is something that needs to be addressed, it's something that needs to be dealt with, our mistakes are still smaller than God's mercy. And if our God can forgive us, so can his people. If our God says you can move on and you can be blessed, it is so. Some members of our congregation, you guys have rap sheets. And I don't mean that theoretically, I'm like legitimately. Some of you guys have rap sheets. And we can go look it up online, right? And some of you, you've come, you talk to me about it. And we've had those conversations. And I know some members of our family still carry guilt for things that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago when they were young and they were stupid. But it's important for them to remember and for all of us to remember those mistakes, no matter how permanent they are in the legal system, those mistakes are still smaller than God's mercy. In fact, the Apostle Paul was a murderer, and he was God's chosen instrument to bring the gospel to Europe, one of the most powerful evangelists ever to live. And when we meet him, he's presiding over a lynching. His mercy is bigger than our mistakes. Some of you, it's hard to even explain, to even put words around exactly what's gone wrong in your past, but you have a reputation. We are in the right places or the wrong places, depending on how you look at it. People avoid you. They won't speak to you because they know the you from 5 years ago or the you from 10 years ago. And it's not like one specific thing. There wasn't one, inciting incident, but it was just 100 little things. A few sessions of gossiping, a few rumors that you spread, a few hurtful things you did, a few fights you got into, and you built this reputation brick by brick, and it still haunts you. Because Dubuque, in some ways, is a decent-sized city, and in some ways, it is a very small town. And word can get around. And you are reminded constantly, whether by friends or by family or former friends, and family that won't speak to you much anymore, about all the mistakes you made. But those mistakes are all smaller than God's mercy. And if you are pursuing him, you are forgiven. And regardless of what others may think and how much they may hold on to those things that you have done, God's mercy is bigger. He forgives, and so should his people. And each and every one of us, we will make mistakes today. We will make mistakes this week. We will make mistakes this year. We will make mistakes until Jesus comes home or we die, whichever one comes first. And for each and every one of them, God's mercy is sufficient. Now, I don't want us to forget last week. Sin is serious. Destroy your sin before your sin destroys you. But also remember the rest of the sermon last week. And remember this passage. God is good, and he is forgiving, and his mercy is great. So when we see sin in our lives, we want to confront it. We want to turn it around. We want to get rid of it. But also know you will make mistakes. that each and every one of us is imperfect. Each and every one of us will continue to mess up. But my mistakes are smaller than God's mercy. So I don't need to carry the guilt. I don't need to worry if God's about to drop the hammer on me. If I'm trying to serve him, his mercy is greater. And we can rest in that. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for being a God who is merciful, a God who is kind, a God who is good, a God who is compassionate. Lord, we love you. Help us to trust you as well, to trust you to forgive, to trust that you will not cast us away when we become inconvenient. Help us when we sin to turn away from it, to repent immediately. But Lord, also help us to remember the story of the Gibeonites. That even when people try to follow you in the wrong way, when we make mistakes, when we sin against you, whether it is intentional or not, that you are faithful and you are good and you can forgive. Help us to rest, to have peace, to trust that you are there, that you will not leave us. God, help us to be forgiving as well, to be instruments of your light, to forgive others as you have forgiven us. And in so doing, hopefully we'll make your kingdom a little larger and invite people to come before your throne to serve you, to become a part of your family. Lord, we love you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. After our sermon every week, we go into a time of communion. And there's a short verse that I want to read today out of the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 14. Genesis chapter 14, verse 13 says this: "One who had escaped from a nearby battle, one where a member of Abraham's family had been captured, came and told Abram the Hebrew," that is Abraham, "who was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and Aner, who were allies of Abram." And I know this is an odd verse, right? I've been getting into a lot of weird verses for communion recently, but I bring this up for a reason. This guy, Mamre, just shows up a bunch in Abraham's story, and we never really hear much about him. But this verse tells us he was an Amorite, which, in case you didn't realize, was one of those people that Deuteronomy chapter 20 says has to be utterly destroyed. But here we're told he is an ally of Abraham, an ally of Israel. And every time that he shows up, he's spoken of positively as a follower of God and one who the Lord is blessing. Because from the very beginning, before Israel even existed, when God had just chosen Abram and his family to begin this rescue mission for all the earth, from that moment, actually even before, God said, even those who are born to families that I have cursed, they can still come home. The people that we least expect, they can still be a part of this kingdom. So we shouldn't be surprised that the Gibeonites are allowed to serve in the temple, and we shouldn't be surprised that Rahab becomes a part of David's family, and we shouldn't be surprised that sometimes people darken the doors of our church that we never thought would walk in here, because from the very beginning, God has been calling everyone home. So today, as you take communion and remember what Jesus has done for you, remember that that sacrifice was done for everyone else as well, for the least likely people, for people like Rahab, for people like the people of Gibeon, and for people like Mamre. And once you have thanked him for his sacrifice for you and for all others, you can take the bread as a symbol of his body, the juice as a symbol of his blood, as a way of remembering his sacrifice for all of us.
shall close in death. When I rise, the world's unknown, and behold, beyond the throne, Rock of Ages left for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let me hide myself in thee. Let me hide myself in thee. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. Go out and be the hands and feet of Jesus.